A Fox News alert on the target of a massive manhunt in Tennessee. Police revealing the man suspected of killing 4 people at a Waffle House near Nashville has a history of mental illness. That's how we begin our Monday morning. I'm John Scott.
I'm Julie Banderas. Police also say 29-year-old Travis Reinking had previous encounters with law enforcement, including in the nation's capital, before he opened fire on restaurant patrons early Sunday morning using an AR-15 rifle that was once confiscated.
We have learned that Reinking was arrested by the United States Secret Service for being in a restricted area near the White House in July of 2017. His Illinois firearms authorization was revoked, to our understanding, at the request of the FBI, and 4 weapons were seized by Tazewell County authorities. Among the weapons seized by those authorities was the AR-15 rifle used at the Waffle House today.
Now, James Shaw Jr., the brave customer who was inside the restaurant at the time of the shooting, is speaking out about his decision to charge the gunman. Jonathan Seri, live from Antioch, Tennessee, where that shooting took place. Jonathan.
Hi, John. Everyone's calling him a hero except for James Shaw Jr. himself. He says he's no hero. The father of a 4-year-old girl says that when all this went down, the only thing on his mind was self-preservation. Listen.
I knew I had it in me, but I haven't had any specific combat training. It's just, I fight my daughter every night so I can get her, put her to bed. But I just knew it was me or him or that type of scenario. So I chose to go with what I wanted to go with, and it worked.
Yeah, it definitely worked. When Shaw saw the attacker look down to fiddle with his gun, he wrestled the weapon away from him and threw it over the Waffle House counter. Police say those actions saved many more lives. The gunman left on foot. Police believe he walked to his nearby apartment complex to put on a pair of pants. 29-year-old Travis Reinking was last seen walking along a tree line behind the apartment complex early Sunday morning wearing nothing but black pants. In addition to his arrest outside the White House last year, police records from Reinking's home county in Illinois suggest the suspect was delusional and thought he was being stalked by singer Taylor Swift.
I want to be very careful of my comments because, again, I would not want someone is going to be responsible for charging him and hopefully a successful prosecution of a case, and I want to be very careful. However, I think anybody who reads the police reports that we have here that I've given you copies of would conclude that there's certainly evidence that there's some sort of mental health issues involved.
And as we speak, the active search for the gunman continues here in the Nashville suburb of Antioch, although police say there have been no credible sightings since he was seen outside that apartment complex early Sunday morning. John, back to you.
Sad story. Jonathan Seri from Antioch. Thank you.
So the White House is now gearing up for a first in the Trump presidency, a state visit. This one with his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, who is set to arrive in Washington less than 2.5 hours from now. And the two leaders have a lot on their agenda.
We want to deepen the relationship. We want to continue the trading partnership. We want to talk about security. You mentioned Iran. There are a whole host of issues. President Macron talked about Russia over the weekend. So there's a whole host of issues that both President Macron and President Trump want to talk about. They talk frequently on the phone. They have a very close personal relationship.
White House correspondent Kevin Cork is live on the North Lawn with more. Hi, Kevin.
Hey there, Julie. As you point out, so much to get to for the two world leaders, and frankly, the stakes couldn't be much higher. As Macron makes his visit here, among concerns around the globe that the president will, in fact, pull back from the Iran nuclear deal. And while the president and his French counterpart have established a fairly strong relationship during his time in office, Mr. Macron is hoping to reinforce not just the legacy of our partnership with the French, but also to emphasize its bold new future, standing together on issues surrounding security, for example, and trade, and the environment, and yes, as you can well imagine, even policy surrounding the Iran nuclear deal.
The president's been very clear about how he feels about this deal and some changes that he needs and wants to see reflected will certainly come up. I'm not going to get ahead of anything that the president may or may not commit to and what he'd want to see in that. But the president's been very clear about the dislike he has for this deal and how he wants to make sure that we get something better.
Make sure that we get something better. Now, for his part, President Macron is taking sort of the long view here, Julie, noting that his relationship with the president is one of friendship and pragmatism. And even where differences exist, the two can come together. Take Syria, for example.
Even after the end of the war against ISIS, the US, France, our allies, all the countries of the region, even Russia and Turkey, will have a very important role to play in order to create this new Syria and ensure Syrian people to decide for the future.
All part of a week of diplomacy and discussion here at the White House, one that will also see the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, make her way here. Part of a very busy week indeed. Lots of flag changing along the promenade here on Pennsylvania Avenue. Don't forget, we have a briefing coming up, Julie. That one's happening today at 1 p.m. And, of course, we'll have all the details for you. But for now, back to you.
All right, Kevin Cork, thank you so much. John?
France is not only America's most long-standing ally, but its president shares a common bond with President Trump when it comes to politics.
We have a very special relationship because both of us are probably the maverick of the systems on both sides. I think President Trump's election was unexpected in your country, and probably my election was unexpected in my country. And we are not part of the classical political system.
Joining us now, Tom Rogan. He covers foreign policy and politics for the Washington Examiner. So President Macron describes himself as a maverick. Why do these two get along so well, or seem to, Tom?
Well, I think the first reason, John, is that President Macron, since entering office, has made a very deliberate and clear stance in terms of not criticizing President Trump in the media. Where he criticizes him, he qualifies that criticism to specific issues. He says, look, he's a great partner, but we disagree on this. If you contrast that with, for example, Chancellor Angela Merkel, who Kevin Cork notes is coming this week as well, I think that appeals to President Trump's personal approach towards foreign leaders. And I also think on the issues, there is a lot of alignment below the surface in terms of issues like Iran, for example.
Well, and ISIS as well. Both France and the United States have a strong interest in wiping ISIS from the face of the earth.
That's correct, yes. No, the French government has, especially under President Macron, escalated the number of special operations forces who are on the ground in Syria working alongside the US and British special forces in that regard. So that's a tangible show of French power. I think when President Trump sees the intelligence briefing and says who is on the ground, who is putting their people in harm's way to support our alliance, Macron is high up on that list, and I think the president pays heed to that. As an extension, President Macron has also pledged, and is in the process of doing so, to increase France's defense spending to 2% of GDP, which is the NATO target. And of course, President Trump has been very upset with some European member states of NATO who have not done that. So I think it shows Trump, Macron can say to Trump, look, I'm speaking nicely to you, but I'm also doing things that you have said you care about, and here are the facts of those things.
Macron spoke about the threat, the common threat of ISIS, and some nation states as well. Listen to this.
I will be very blunt. The day we will have finished this war against ISIS, if we live, definitely and totally, even from a political point of view, we will leave the floor to the Iranian regime, Bashar al-Assad and these guys. And they will prepare the new war. They will fuel the new terrorists.
Quite a difference from the Obama administration, where, engagement, rapprochement with the Iranians seemed to be a key pillar of foreign policy.
Yes, and what you're seeing there really, though, is the sort of tip of the iceberg from Macron, because as much as the French would much prefer President Trump to stay in the Iran deal as it is, on things like ballistic missile development. Also the actions of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in the Middle East in terms of places like Beirut and Baghdad undercutting democracy. The French are very engaged in Lebanon alongside the United States. There is a lot more French aggressive action against Iran than, as you say, we saw under the Obama administration. And Trump knows that. And that doesn't make the news sometimes, but it matters because it signifies a closeness, a sense of shared interest in trying to restrain Iranian influence. And also, as an addendum to that, the French are very tough in terms of supporting the U.S. line on counterterrorism and the political moderation reforms of Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince. So below the surface, a lot of engagement both at the political, military and intelligence levels.
Tom Rogan from the Washington Examiner. Busy week in Washington, especially at the White House. Tom, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The sole surviving suspect from the 2015 Paris terror attacks receiving a jail sentence in Belgium. Why he's being sentenced and how he's been sentenced before the Paris attacks trial. Plus, some Republicans rattled over the Michael Cohen raid as they try to find out if feds seized communications between him and President Trump. Is the president being investigated? Next.
And it's not just any lawyer we're talking about. We're talking about the lawyer for the president.
The only surviving suspect in the 2015 Paris terror attacks receives a 20-year prison sentence for a different crime. A Belgian court found Salah Abdeslam and an accomplice guilty of attempted murder over a shootout with Belgian police at a house where they were hiding out. He was arrested 3 days later. The raid was carried out after a 4-month manhunt after his alleged participation in plotting the 2015 attack in both Paris and Brussels. Those killed 130 people at a concert hall, stadium, restaurants, and bars. Police say he then fled the city and made his way over the French-Belgian border. Abdeslam is now awaiting a separate trial for those attacks.
Mounting speculation from some Republicans after the FBI raid on President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Congressman Jim Jordan sending a letter directly to Attorney General Jeff Sessions today, asking him if he was consulted beforehand. This as Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who he appointed, tells the president he is not the target of the Cohen investigation. Here is the congressman just a short time ago.
On the Michael Cohen raid, was the Attorney General consulted? Did Rod Rosenstein actually talk to the Attorney General? Because remember, this raid was run out of, not under the umbrella of the special counsel, but it was Rod Rosenstein, according to press reports, who's been the one who said, let's go seek a warrant and actually raid, kick in the door of the president's lawyer.
Let's bring in Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for talking to us.
Great to be with you, Julie. Thank you.
The president is tweeting about how GOP lawmakers are asking Sessions to investigate not only Comey, but also Hillary Clinton. But it's interesting because he also writes, good luck with that request. That's obviously dripping in sarcasm. He doesn't think it's going to get done. It is unlikely, possibly, that anybody is going to investigate Comey when the president himself points out the fact that by leaking this information, it's actually illegal, and that those memos, in fact, belong to the federal government. What do you make of the president's disbelief that lawmakers will actually get anywhere with this?
Well, the president's tweets reflect reality, and the fact that Clinton should have been thoroughly investigated, but it didn't happen under Obama. They covered for her every which way to try to help her be president. But there is an investigation going on with regard to Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation and the Russia uranium business. But that also points to the fact, Julie, that Rosenstein should be gone. He appointed Mueller when he and Mueller both knew they had both been investigating the Clinton Foundation, Russia getting our uranium, all the illegality around that. They knew well they were involved in that, and yet he appoints Mueller, his buddy that was investigating the uranium story, to investigate Trump or his administration. Right. I mean, it is so outrageous. They knew the answer, and I can tell you, I didn't need to sign on to a letter to find out whether or not Jeff Sessions knew about the raid on Cohen's home. It is an outrageous raid, and anybody that knows the law should be outraged, but some people hate the president so much it overwhelms their ability to understand and know the law that they've studied. But I can tell you, Jeff Sessions didn't know, and I trust my sources a whole lot more than any that the Washington Post or others are using. And also, the Washington Post story that Sessions is going to resign if Rosenstein were fired.
Yeah,
I don't believe that. That's more. It's more manipulation from the Washington Post.
I don't think Jeff Sessions is going anywhere. He doesn't want to go anywhere. But obviously, he's trying to save face for Rosenstein, and there is a trickle-down effect here because, as we all know,
Jeff is a loyal guy.
Jeff Sessions was appointed by the president, but Jeff Sessions is the guy who actually appointed Rod Rosenstein. So if Rod Rosenstein is fired, Jeff Sessions does not want out. Here's my question, though.
Let me tell you, though, he knows more about Rosenstein today and Tosh Gehar and some of the people that have been undermining him, making him look bad. He's finding out more all the time about his appointment, and so I don't believe he'll be quitting. Rosenstein needs to go. He's got to go.
Okay, what if that raid on Michael Cohen's office, first of all, had anything to do with the Russia investigation? And as we know, the Attorney General recused himself in the Russia investigation. How could this get complicated for Jeff Sessions?
Well, I don't think it can get complicated for Jeff Sessions, but he should have been consulted before the raid took place. It was outside the purview. And by the way, if it had had anything to do with Russia, then Mueller didn't need to ask anybody's permission. He needed to go after it. But as you know, that raid was conducted by using the U.S. attorney because Mueller said it was outside his purview, and his purview included Russia. It had nothing to do with Russia. It had everything to do with trying to get something on Cohen so that he would agree to testify, even if he had to lie to pin something on the president. That's what it involved.
All right. More to come. Thank you very much, Congressman Louis Gohmert. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Great to talk to you, Julie. Thank you.
President Trump's nominee to be Secretary of State faces rare opposition from a Senate panel. The latest on today's upcoming vote, live from Capitol Hill. Plus, Kellyanne Conway lashes out after CNN asks about her husband.
It's fascinating to me that CNN would go there, but it's very good for the whole world to have just witnessed that it's now, that it's now fair game what people's, how people's spouses and significant others may.
And was Tim Bergling was vacationing in Oman.
You just went there.
Yes.
CNN just went there. Look, differences of opinions.
By the way, this isn't critical. I'm just asking about.
Of course it was meant to harass and embarrass.
That's Counselor to President Trump, Kellyanne Conway, pushing back after CNN asks her about critical tweets her lawyer husband has made against the Trump administration. Conway implying the question is a sexist example of a media double standard. Is it? Let's ask our media panel. Ali Stuckey is host of The Conservative Millennial on Conservative Review TV. Chris Freitz is founder of Storyline and host of Politics Inside Out on Sirius XM POTUS. Chris, to you first, is there anything inappropriate about Dana Bash asking Kellyanne Conway about her husband's critical tweets?
No, John, I don't think so. I mean, I think Dana was doing her job. And let's take a look at George Conway. George Conway is a prominent lawyer. He's a guy that President Trump was considering for a Solicitor General. So he's out there in the public. This is not somebody who is a kind of stay behind the scenes husband. It's a guy who's also been in the news himself, and he's made some news with these critical tweets. He's been critical of how the Trump administration handled the rollout for the Muslim ban. He had some critical things to say about the president's tweets, how that might hurt their Supreme Court case. He's also been critical of the communications strategy at the White House, making the point that it's very hard to be communications director when you have a president who is often changing his position. So to ask Kellyanne Conway what is what's happening with your husband's tweets seems very much in the realm here, John. It was a responsible question by an excellent journalist, and I think Dana Bash did the right thing there by asking a question that is on a lot of people's minds. And frankly, you know, it's also something that's interesting to watch. I mean, the James Carville, Mary Madeline stuff is always endlessly interesting to political insiders and political journalists. I think this was a very similar situation here where you have two spouses who aren't necessarily lining up on their public positions, and Dana Bash asked about it.
All right, well, Ali, you know, nobody's asking Mary Madeline to defend James Carville's tweets in Washington. I mean, there are political couples who have opposing points of view.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, whether you like this question or not, or whether or not you agree with it, this was absolutely fascinating television. And the reason why is because it's so symbolic of the tension that we've been seeing between this administration and the media. And I know we decry the negative aspects of the tension that we've seen, but I actually think it's a good thing. I think that it was good that Dana Bash stood her ground, and I think it was good that Kellyanne Conway pushed back, that she voiced her opinion on this. I think it's good that the media and politicians are holding each other accountable, that they're able to have these kind of arguments openly. And I actually personally don't think that Dana Bash meant to harass Kellyanne Conway. I actually do think that this was a fair question, considering the fact that he's got tens of thousands of followers on Twitter. However, I do also agree with Kellyanne being able to stand her ground and push back when she felt like she needed to.
Yeah, she did well on that. I mean, Chris, you know, you go back to the campaign when Hillary Clinton, you know, Donald Trump was facing all kinds of accusations about the Access Hollywood tape and so forth. Nobody was asking Hillary Clinton about the guy that she's married to. It does seem that sometimes there's a double standard in that regard.
Well, I think people were bringing up Bill Clinton during the campaign. They were making the case, and a lot of Democrats were put in a very tough position to be able to criticize Donald Trump when they had supported Bill Clinton in the past. But Bill Clinton, of course, wasn't on the ballot, but still being asked about in the same way that Kellyanne Conway's husband became news because he was disagreeing with the Trump administration. And to be fair here, John, you know, he also pointed out he's a very strong supporter of the Trump administration. He had some critiques, some things he thought were done wrong. It makes sense to ask your wife about that. It seemed very much in bounds. It seemed like, you know, something that you or I might do if we had Kellyanne on our shows. I would ask that question every day of the week and twice on Sunday because I think it could spurn an interesting answer. And in this case, it did. If this was something Kellyanne Conway didn't want to stoke, you know, she could have answered it much differently. She could have said, look, I don't speak for my husband, and kind of ended it there. But she kind of made a case that this was somehow a sexist, out-of-bounds question, which I don't think it was, John.
Ali, it sounds like you would have asked her the same thing.
You know, I probably would have, but again, I think it's fair for Kellyanne to possibly get defensive about this. Maybe she knew it would make good television, and I think it did make good television. Again, I think that Dana was justified in asking a question like this. But the fact of the matter is, the administration has continued to push back against what they at least believe is a false narrative or unfair coverage in the media. And I think that's a fight that the American people want to continue to see. And I think that CNN and other outlets should continue to stand their ground if they think that they are covering this administration and even Kellyanne Conway fairly.
Ali Stuckey and Chris Freites, good discussion. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Pompeo facing some major pushback ahead of today's Senate vote on his nomination for Secretary of State, what an unfavorable outcome could mean for Pompeo. Plus, President Trump calling the latest pledge from North Korea good news for the world. But some aren't convinced Kim Jong-un will actually see it through. We'll have the latest on U.S.-North Korea relations next.
Donald Trump has shaken this up. He has Kim Jong-un on the defensive. I think that's why you're seeing this.
Fox News alert, in just a few hours, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will be voting on whether to endorse Mike Pompeo to be the next Secretary of State. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders is urging committee members to put politics aside.
We certainly hope that some members will change their minds. Look, at some point, Democrats have to decide whether they love this country more than they hate this president. And they have to decide that they want to put the safety and the security and the diplomacy of our country ahead of their own political games. And we're very hopeful that they will.
Rich Edson is live on Capitol Hill with the very latest there. Hey, Rich.
Yeah, good morning, Julie. And a major development in this confirmation just a couple of minutes ago, Senator Joe Manchin, the Democrat from West Virginia, says he plans on voting to support Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State. That makes it very likely that eventually the full Senate will confirm Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State. But there are some issues with procedure and some other items that have to come before then, and questions of timing as to when this is all going to happen. The first move in this is tonight, 5 o'clock. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee will vote to consider Mike Pompeo's nomination. All the Democrats on that committee, plus Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, say they plan on voting against Mike Pompeo in that committee. President Trump leaned on Paul publicly last week. Pompeo and Paul had a meeting. It appears, though, that changed nothing. From there, the president tweeted this morning, quote, "Hard to believe obstructionists may vote against Mike Pompeo for Secretary of State. The Dems will not approve hundreds of good people, including the ambassador to Germany. They are maxing out the time on approval process for all. Never happened before. Need more Republicans." Now, currently, Pompeo is short the votes to clear the committee, though there are several scenarios from here, all heavy in Senate procedure. The bottom line is Republicans say that the full Senate likely confirms Pompeo. The only question from here is timing. So you've got Senator Joe Manchin. He joins Democrat Senator Heidi Heitkamp in supporting Mike Pompeo's nomination. And there are other Democrats that Republicans think might join in the effort to confirm Mike Pompeo, including those from Alabama and Indiana. There are Republicans and Mike Pompeo who are pushing to get this done as quickly as possible. At the end of this week, there's a foreign ministers meeting, NATO foreign ministers meeting in Brussels. There's likely going to be a conversation about the deadline upcoming with the Iran nuclear deal there. So Pompeo is going to want to be a direct part of that. There are also these discussions ongoing for this potential summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un in the next couple of months. That's something Pompeo would like to do as Secretary of State, not just as CIA director. Julie?
All right, Rich Edson, thank you very much. John?
Meantime, President Trump takes a wait-and-see approach after North Korea's announcement that it's suspending nuclear testing. But lawmakers remain skeptical as President Trump and Kim Jong-un prepare for a historic meeting in the coming months. Joined now by Michael O'Hanlon, Director of Foreign Policy Research at the Brookings Institution. Michael, what do you think of this promise from the North? Should we take them at their word?
Well, I think that it's encouraging, and I think President Trump should feel good about his overall strategy so far, even though it produced some anxiety in the hearts of many of us. It also produced anxiety in China and North Korea, which I think has contributed to Kim's charm offensive. But let's face it, President Kim is going to try to get the best possible deal for the fewest possible concessions. And he probably is not really interested in quickly denuclearizing, if what we mean by that is a complete end and elimination of his nuclear arsenal. I think we have to be realistic about what he's really talking about. So it's very important for President Trump to stay very calm and realistic about what could be on the table here, and to think through with his team various scenarios so that we don't give too much for what turns out to be a small North Korean concession. I'm encouraged, but there's a long way to go.
Here is what the president tweeted about this yesterday. He wrote, "We are a long way from conclusion on North Korea. Maybe things will work out and maybe they won't. Only time will tell. But the work I am doing now should have been done a long time ago." He doesn't often fail to remind us that a number of presidents have dealt with Kim Jong-un and his predecessors, and nobody has really brought North Korea to heel.
That's right. And one of the nice things about this issue, if you want to look for a silver lining, is that it's not a good issue for partisan acrimony, because presidents of both parties have struggled mightily in dealing with North Korea, and specifically with all three Kims, but Mr. Kim's father and grandfather, and during the Clinton, Bush, Obama, and now Trump years. And also, let's not celebrate too soon, because there were periods in each of those three previous presidencies when, at least temporarily, things looked promising for a while as well, especially with Clinton and George W. Bush. Maybe not so much with President Obama. But therefore, I think President Trump knows this, that he can't take this to the bank. He tweeted as much. There is a long ways to go before we even get a modest deal, much less complete denuclearization. So far, so good on the strategy, but we haven't really seen any verifiable concessions yet.
Well, and verification is really the key here. I mean, if the North has agreed to deals in the past, which they've instantly almost violated, if they are going to make concessions, they have to be verifiable.
That's right. And I think a minimum requirement for the United States, even for an interim deal, is a cessation of nuclear production, not just testing, but production of new materials that can be used in a bomb and the bombs themselves. So we're going to have the kind of access to the centrifuges, to the nuclear reactors that we have tried to have around the world in trying to limit proliferation over the years. Not necessarily the United States, but some kind of a neutral, professional, technocratic, and dependable monitoring agency. So you got to go well beyond the freeze on testing of missiles and nuclear weapons that President Kim just promised. It's not enough for him to stop testing if he keeps building more bombs and more rockets. There's got to be a stop at a minimum, or a cap at a minimum, on the building of new capability.
It is fascinating to watch, and let's hope that that can happen. Michael O'Hanlon from the Brookings Institution. Michael, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
A free airline snack costing one traveler almost as much as the plane ticket. And we're not talking peanuts here. Why did a Colorado woman pay $500 for an apple? Plus, does the lawsuit filed by the DNC against Russia, WikiLeaks, and the Trump campaign have any legal legs to stand on, or is it just another fundraising tool? We'll debate next with our panel.
We can't afford not to do this, because when you look ahead and you see what was done before and what they're trying to do again, our democracy is at stake.